Why, hello, my wonderful unicorns. This is Mrs. Donahue, and we are here to discuss Scene 2, Act 1 of Taming of the Shrew. So, the only character that we really have left to meet is Petruchio, and he gets his own scene because he's a lot. I like to introduce him to you guys as someone that you shouldn't particularly like, and then let you see how much of that he fights back on, like how much you come to like him anyway. In terms of Petruchio, this is what you should be following through as you read. One, he is a friend of Hortensio's, and we generally find Hortensio gross, so I think that should kind of color Petruchio in your opinion. Hortensio is a little bit, and anyone who's friends with him, probably the same way. Petruchio's man is Grumio. I know that Grumio and Gremio are names that are almost identical. They're one letter apart, and it's going to be hard for some of you to keep straight who Grumio is and who Gremio is. Gremio with an E is the other suitor with Hortensio. He's not going to make much in the way of headway in the play. Grumio is Petruchio's manservant, and much like Tranio and Lucentio, they're best buds. In fact, the whole opening sequence with the knocking, they keep saying the word knock over and over again, it's a pun on Petruchio arriving and needing to knock on a door, but also knocking and punching are the same, and pate and gate sound the same, and pate means head, and they're basically arguing over whether or not they're going to get in a fight, and Petruchio keeps pushing Grumio's buttons until Grumio's actually a little upset. But Petruchio finds it hysterical that he's pissed him off. And they're almost wrestling with one another at some point, like little boys. Like at some point of this opening sequence, they're actually play fighting with one another the way that you would expect really good friends or brothers to do. The actual line here in Shakespeare is, he wrings him by the ears. Shakespeare often gives us very little information about what he expects the actors to be doing with one another, which is great if you're an actor, because it means that you can add a lot to this. Like, these two guys can be having an all-out kind of brawl as long as at one point Petruchio rings Grumio by the ear. But sometimes for readers it's a little confusing because you don't quite know what these guys are doing with each other while they're talking. They're not just standing there talking, that's boring. But you often have to fill those gaps in your own brain. Petruchio comes off here like Katerina did, where he's very punny and funny. So he keeps pushing Grumio's buttons with plays on words. And then Hortensio comes in and essentially says, why are you here? Petruchio says, well, my father died, and I have come here to get a wife. That's what my job is right now. People look at this a couple different ways. When your father dies, if you are his son and heir, your job is to establish the line, right? You have to carry on the family name, you have to keep the money in the family. It's your job. So he's got to get a wife because he's got to make some babies. You can read this opening line by Petruchio where he says, Senor Hortensio, thus it stands with me, Antonio, my father, is deceased, and I have thrust myself into this maze, happily to wive and thrive as best I may. Crowns in my purse I have, and goods at home, and so am come abroad to see the world. I have left my home and come here to find a wife, and I have money. Some people take issue with him saying he has crowns in his purse here, because he might have only a few crowns in his purse. Crowns would have been how they describe coins or money. But he says his primary aim is to take a wife. Is his primary aim to take a wife because he needs babies? That's a fairly innocent reason for a man to need a wife. But as it gets further down, Hortensio's like, well, I got a wife for you, but she, despite being fabulously wealthy, is difficult. Difficult as all get out. Nobody wants to touch her with a 10-foot pole, even though she's really rich. And Petruchio basically goes, I heard rich. If slightly further down, I am on page 3, close to the top of the page. And Petruchio says, Senor Hortensio, twixt such friends as we, few words suffice, and therefore, if thou know one rich enough to be Petruchio's wife, as wealth is a burden of my wooing dance, be she as foul as was Florentius's love, as old as Sibyl, and as cursed and shrewd as Socrates, Xanthippe, or worse, she moves me not, or not removes, at least, affection's edge in me. Were she as rough as are the swelling Adriatic seas, I come to wive it wealthily in Padua. If wealthily, then happily in Padua. So Petruchio says the primary thing he wants out of a wife is wealth. He wants to marry a wealthy woman. We often think that this means that he's in some way spent his father's money and is a little broke right now. He says he has a house and he says he has goods in his house. People have portrayed him different ways. Sometimes when you get to Petruchio's house, it's completely outfitted with all these wonderful luxuries and seems like a wonderful house. Other times you get to it and it's like he's sold off all the furniture and he's down to the bare bones. People do it both ways. He values money in the wife, certainly. The list of things he gave there, not that you need to particularly know who Florentius is or Xanthippe, but what you have to understand is he said if it's somebody who is old, cruel, mean, ugly, I don't care as long as she's wealthy. Violent, I don't care if she's violent. I just care that she's rich. And then Hortensio's like, are you sure? Because I know this woman and she's young and she's beautiful and she was raised in a good family, good education, and she's rich, but she is a miserable human being. Like, she's the worst person ever. Nobody around here wants to marry her. And Petruchio goes, I heard rich. Like, I heard you say she was rich. I'm good. Show me the girl. I'm here. Especially you're telling me no competition. Nobody is going to try and take this girl from me. Yes, let's do it. And he thinks it's a bonus that she's described as young and pretty and raised by a good family, but wealthy. That's all he heard. Wealthy and single and no competition. It makes me not trust him because you would think people would have a standard, right? You would hope that people would have a standard for their spouse. Even though I said understanding marriage is very different in this time period, like you don't normally marry for love. Love is also different. Like, do you really think Hortensio loves Bianca even though he wants to marry her? No, he's attracted to Bianca and she is from a good family and her father's respected and she's well educated. So those check many boxes for him. Even Lucentio. Do you think Lucentio really loves Bianca? Because he sees her from across the field, hears her speak one sentence, and then is like, this is it for me, I'm done, this is her. He's obviously attracted to her, and she checks boxes. Like, she visibly is an attractive woman from a good family. You would be able to tell that by the state of her dress and the company she keeps. Like, those are things you would be able to tell from a distance. So they're not really worried about her personality so much as they're worried about being attracted to her. They had a belief, a very firm belief, that your physical appearance communicated a lot about your personality. So that if Bianca is beautiful, she clearly is good, sweet, etc. Oftentimes you'll see when they portray Kat in movies, and we talked a little bit about this with scene 1, is her hair's a little wild and maybe her makeup's a little wild. So she looks a little bit more physically unkempt than her sister to communicate that she's a little bit more disobedient, that she's wilder, therefore more of a handful. You would have been able to know a lot about a person at a glance during Shakespeare's time because certain colors and certain fabrics were forbidden from other people. Like, you couldn't just go out and buy clothes that were purple was the one big color. Only royalty could wear purple. Only royalty could wear mink for a while. Mink is, when you look at old cartoons, mink and ermine. Mink is like the really fluffy fur. Ermine is the white one with the black spots that you see in cartoons when they draw kings and queens. So those were types of things that no one besides royalty could buy, just for an example. So it would be that you could look at Bianca and know she's wealthy. But you don't know if she's a good match for you, personality-wise, because they don't particularly care about that. If you check many boxes, we can get used to you. Petruchio and Hortensio keep talking about Caterina. Now, it goes on and on for about a page like it goes all the way down to the bottom of page 4 until like them describing how awful Katerina is and like warning Petruchio. And all Petruchio hears is, she's wealthy and no one's going to compete with me for her. She's wealthy and no one's going to compete with me for her. And he keeps telling them, I don't care. I don't care what you're saying about her personality. Now, I want to talk about this in 2 ways. One, you should care about your spouse. I am always disturbed that he doesn't seem to care about his house. There's also a little sequence in here, though, where he says, like, I've seen a lot of things. Like, I've been to the wilds and I've seen lions and I've hunted wild boar. And I know that doesn't sound impressive to you guys, but wild boar are really mean, violent animals that killed a lot of people who hunted them. He's like, I've been in the middle of hurricanes and I've been at sea when my boat almost capsized, and like, I've seen some stuff. So why am I afraid of some woman? That's at the top of page 7, that speech. I have it highlighted in the section that I'm giving you. Essentially, he's saying, I have been through things that are actually scary, so why will I be afraid of her? Like, why be afraid of a woman's tongue that gives not half so great a blow to hear as will a chestnut in a farmer's fire? When you put chestnuts in the fire, they pop. So he was like, no matter what she does, it's going to be sort of small grapes compared to what I've been through. Not that he's any sort of like, he's not like a world traveler by any means. He's just a wealthy man in his own time. He's done some things. But he's basically saying, I'm not afraid of her. Tush, tush, fear boys with bugs. So he's basically saying to the other men, you're little boys who are scared of the bugs they're playing with. You're not real men. And it's all done in a joking tone because they're all friends, but Petruchio essentially says to them, if you guys are afraid of this woman, what kind of men are you? And they're sort of like, you have no idea what you're getting involved with. But he's like, no, you guys are just stop it. Like, who cares? Like, there are 2 opinions on Petruchio's I don't care. One, maybe he's like, hey, handle yourself a woman with a little fire in her. Handle the heater, get out of the kitchen. Other people are like, he just intends to do whatever he needs to do to her to get her to behave. So it could be kind of positive, like, guys, why are you making such a big deal out of this? Just deal with it. Just be men and deal with it. And that could be positive, but it also could kind of imply that he is intending to break her. And it is called Taming of the Shrew. So he is intending to do something to get her to do what he wants. After that, we hear Mr. Hortensio sort of say, essentially, like, I kind of want you to help me out here because I'm looking to get in good with Bianca. I'm looking for Bianca to have some time alone with me. So he wants to be disguised as a teacher and have Petruchio bring him to Baptista and say, here's a teacher for your daughter, and then sneak Hortensio into Bianca's rooms. You guys have heard this plan before because Lucentio has the same plan. He's going to be disguised as a teacher, and in fact, of course, enter Lucentio disguised as a teacher. Gremio is bringing him. And the deal that Gremio's made with him is Gremio's like, I found this tutor. He has no idea that Lucentio wants to court Bianca. None. He just thinks the guy's a tutor. And he basically says, I have a deal. This tutor's going to keep telling Bianca how wonderful I am. That's going to be my end. This guy's going to be alone with Bianca for hours and hours during the day. I'm going to have so much free press from this guy. It's going to be amazing. And Hortensio's like, that doesn't seem fair. It might seem weird to you why they're so focused on the alone time. And in fact, at one point, Hortensio says, I'd like to be alone to make love to Bianca. They don't mean make love like have sex. What they mean is women were so guarded by their fathers during courtship that if you were courting a woman, you had to basically court her father. Like, you'd come to her house and talk to her father about all the things that you liked about her and all the things you wanted to do with her. And it was very PG, you know what I mean? Like, you're not exactly telling daddy about how attractive you find her. Within the realm of politeness, you'd be like, you have a beautiful daughter, but you're not exactly doing anything else. you wouldn't have really been alone with your future spouse until after you were married. Like, not alone. So the fact that they're like, there's an opportunity for us to be alone in her room with her because her tutors would be allowed to do that. Like, they see this as a huge advantage. I could talk to her alone, and then she could really like me, and then she could tell her father, like, you know, Daddy, I really thought Hortensio was like great. And maybe that would help, because obviously Baptista really is concerned with her opinion. He wants Bianca to get whatever Bianca wants. Bianca is spoiled, the more spoiled child. So they think of it as like an in to getting with Bianca. They're not really intending to do anything physically risque with her at this point, but it's just the advantage of being alone and being able to speak freely to her without having to censor it for her father. I know you guys have a different idea of courtship, but I mean, they're kind of going through all the normal motions. Anyone who was courting someone would always look for an opportunity to court them as alone as possible. Obviously, if you're courting someone, you do want some private time just to talk with them. There's a couple of very funny Petruchio moments in here. At one point, Gremio, when he meets Petruchio, and Hortensio says, oh, Petruchio here's going to go marry Cat, so we're in for competing over Bianca. Gremio's like, will you woo the wildcat? And Petruchio goes, will I live? Like, he's teasing them. It's kind of amazing how much he teases them, because if she were to do that, she would be considered this rude, disobedient woman, but Petruchio's saying kind of the same stuff that she was, and it's funny. As you get close to the end, we see that Lucentio's already obviously disguised, and then Tranio comes in pretending he's Lucentio. The play gets confusing here because of the level of disguise that's going on. So Lucentio is disguised as a tutor, and no one besides Tranio knows that he's trying to get with Bianca. But you have to think about this practically. If all Lucentio does is lie to Baptista about Bianca, like if he just pretends to be a tutor and never makes like a formal declaration, he has no shot at marrying her. So Tranio, dressed as Lucentio, plans on going to Baptista and sort of saying, I am Lucentio, son of this guy, and I have all these accomplishments, and I would like to marry your daughter. So that later they can just kind of go, oops, wrong Lucentio, but all the information was correct. So he's presenting Lucentio as a suitor. They're just leaving out the fact that it's not the real Lucentio in front of them, but all the information's correct. It also helps as like a distraction factor. If Tranio is there as another suitor, Hortensio and Gremio are so focused on like getting him like away that they're not even paying attention to the actual Lucentio who was alone with Bianca. There's a lot of just kind of talking cleverly back and forth here. Again, in these early scenes, there's not many times where I'm drawing you directly to what's being said in terms of Shakespearean language. This is just establishing a lot of characterization. So you'll notice that at the end there's not a whole lot for you to look at because it's just the back and forth between Hortensio and Tranio and Lucentio and Petruchio. And essentially, we're about to get into the nuts and bolts, which is A, Petruchio trying to marry Caterina and succeeding. Spoiler. B, the disguised tutors courting Bianca. And then you get to see more of Bianca. So keep your eyes on that particular ball because you're going to actually see how her personality is. You guys will have some questions. You'll have some video scene comparisons. All of this is going to be, I think, pretty fun. We had some good responses so far. Some of you are in different pages. Please remember to use the Google Meet. I would like to physically see and hear from you guys just to make sure that you're there and I can help answer any questions. A bunch of you said in your intro documents that e-learning was a struggle for you. I encourage you to try really hard to get as much one-on-one time with me as you can, and I'm happy to schedule it with you because I can always lead better when I'm just with you as opposed to trying to anticipate your questions with the videos. So, reach out. You can also email, and please sign up for the Remind because then we can, be on the phones. I can send you reminders or I can schedule time with you. It's pretty easy. Have a good day and more Shakespeare soon.